Hello, I'm Heather. I'm a front-end designer at Sparkbox. In this video, I'm teaching our full-stack development apprentices how to create simple animations using CSS Transition, Transform, and Animation properties. If you like this beginner's guide, be sure to check out our other videos in this series. Animation is really great in that it can definitely increase the visibility of a product, helps make things clear to the user as to what they can expect, what their next step should be, just all of those kind of things. And it also helps create emotion. It helps develop a brand. It's a way to help reinforce a brand. If you have a brand that is playful, then you're able to add some subtle playful animations to your website to help reinforce that branding. On the flip side, though, we want to make sure animations don't cause any ill effects. Animations, if they are too busy, you have too many of them on a page. You ever go to a website, especially a news site, where you've got all these banner ads and they're all flashing and it's just way too much, then you've defeated the purpose of animation, or good animation. And then, of course, the other thing to think about also with animation is that we want to make sure that we don't trigger seizures. Animations, if they flash too quickly, can trigger a seizure. And so that's something we don't want to have happen either. Today, we're going to talk about CSS Transitions and Transforms, CSS Animations, and then I'm going to give some examples of animating images and SVGs. So let's go. We're going to do most of our work in CodePen. And I'll make these accessible to you as well. First thing we have here is a circle. So I'll have a containing div with a circle in it. And this is all CSS, so we don't have any JavaScript. So it's just CSS and HTML, and the HTML is just very basic, where we've got a div that has been styled to look like a circle. So we're going to focus here on what is going on to make this circle animate. There we go. So when we hover over it, it moves. So how did we make this happen? So here's our circle. We have basic circle with a little bit of space at the bottom. So we'll scroll up from there. Circle has a background color, so we can see it. And we only have two properties. We have, when you're working with CSS transitions, these are the two required properties. We have a transition property set to transform, because we want to transform this in some kind of way. And then a transition duration of 500 milliseconds. The duration can be set in seconds or milliseconds. I could have said in here, instead of 500 milliseconds, I could have had 0.5 seconds, and it would be the same. I would just encourage that whichever you do, that you're consistent throughout your code base, however you choose to write that. Or at least that's my recommendation. So those are the two, and then so you don't see anything different. As we're sitting here, we have these two CSS transition properties, and they don't do anything until we go to hover. So we have this hover pseudo element that when we hover over, we see it transition or transform. We're telling it on hover, transform, translate X, 15 rem. So translate upon the X-axis, 15 rems. So this space is 15 rems. And it's feeling funky because as soon as I go off, when I'm not hovering over, it goes back to its original state. We're going to add two more transition properties that I have commented out and see what these do. So first one, timing function. What the timing function does is creates a little, see how it's a little smoother than it was before. Ease gives it, the timing function is how it moves along that axis. So how it moves as it's transforming. So I have some other examples where it's a little clearer. So here we were wondering why nothing was happening. Well, there's a good reason why nothing was happening, because I applied a delay. So if I hover over for 2 seconds and I'm waiting, there it goes. So it creates a delay before before it translates. So there's that 2 seconds, and then it's going to move. So those are the 4 properties. We have the property, duration, timing function, and delay. You can write these all out separately, or you can, there's a shortcut, so we can hide those. Now the shortcut is simply declaring transition, and then each of these, so this is the property that we're going to transition, which is transform. This is the duration that we're going to transform it. And this is the timing function that we've chosen. And this is the delay. So this shortcut is going to do the exact same thing as all of these properties written out separately. All right, so let's move on. I have another circle. We've called it Circle B. And let's show you Circle B. I didn't want to put them all out at once, just because this allows us to focus on just one thing at a time. So Circle B is a little different here. We also have, I've added a border around it. So it now has this really thick border. And we're using box sizing so we can keep the circle the same size as the circle above. And our hover, when we hover over this time, we're going to change the background color and the border color. So let's see what that looks like. And this is one where you can definitely see that timing function kick in a little bit more. So let's see what that is doing here in our, I'll go up, let's see, I guess we can't see it all. I've kept the shortcut here for our transition. And instead of specifying one property, like I could have specified the border. And if I do that, you're only going to see the border change. So border, transition border, it's still changing everything. Live demos. This is what happens. Why is it still changing everything? I don't know. I was only expecting it to change the border, not everything. What do we do? Background color. Let's save that. So if we, oh, why? Okay. I don't know. I know there's probably got to be a reason. It could be user error. Well, when you have all, it is supposed to hit all of them, background color and border. So we'll get this effect here. Oh, you know what? I know what it is. The transition, I was targeting the transition. I'm hovering no matter what. The transition and the hover are 2 separate things. So, of course, you're going to see on hover, the colors change no matter what. All I'm trying to do is change the transition. So let's watch this ease in out is the timing of it. See how it's so smooth? I bet if we go back and look at this again, after changing it to just the border, it's probably not, it's not quite as smooth. It's subtle. And we have to take the background color away. And that's, so anyways, I will have these pins available for you to go in and play and do all of these things too. So the big thing here was we learned that you can transition multiple properties, and this is the shortcut that you can apply to do so. Let's look at another circle. We'll call it Circle C. And the reason we just called the circle really looks like a leaf. I did this on purpose because I wanted to be able to show some different properties. In order to make our circle look like a leaf, I've added a border radius of 65% and 0. When we want to, we can transform all kinds of different properties. We can transform pretty much anything with a number value. Because that's how it's calculating. It has to have something to calculate in order to do the transform. So if we look at this is our transform, and we're going to transition everything for 2 seconds, and I'm pulling in this thing called cubic Bezier. So I have some links we're going to look at after we look at this animation. So if we hover over, we get this real funky effect. And this is a combination of the perspective that has been set and transformed and the rotate 3D. So this is also showing that we can pass in our transform property, you can pass in more than one value. So you can do all kinds of fun things. Let's see. And then, of course, here on hover, this is how we're changing the transform. The perspective went to, let's see, the perspective we kept the same. They're both 500 pixels. And rotate 3D is where we made a change from 0 degrees to 180 degrees. So that's where you're seeing the flip.
Is it safe to say that when in most of these animations, you'll have to have like a predefined initial state, and then kind of like you repeat that same property, giving new I guess values to it.
Yeah. So you'll have your start and then your finish state.
Okay.
Your start. I want to say finish because when you finish, you actually go back to that start state. But that start, do something, go back.
Okay.
You see that mostly with hover effects on links, where you have your start state. When you hover over, you have another state, and when you hover off, you go back to the original state.
Gotcha. Is it possible to, as you mentioned, you have your initial state, the animation happens, and then terminate in a different state other than the initial?
You can do that with CSS Animations. Okay. I'm not sure about transition and transforms. Transition, if there's a property, I'd have to look into that, but you can definitely do that with animations. So we're going to check out CSS Animations next.
Oh, that's a separate, okay.
Yeah, so we have CSS Transforms and Transitions, and then we also have CSS Animations.
Okay, gotcha.
So they're two separate things. It's interesting. There's a lot of things that you could do with both, but animation gives you states in between. So instead of just, and animations do not need a pseudo class like hovering to kick them off. They just load, they can start on page load.
Okay.
There is also all these things that I've shared with you. You'll find an article by Kirsten Swanson called CSS Transforms and Transitions. There's a lot more examples in there, so definitely check that out. And I was talking about a thing called a timing function called cubic Bezier. So this particular timing function I created using this resource, this website. It is this timing function here. So you can, what we saw earlier, the standard timing functions, the values of ease, there's a value of linear, ease in, ease out, ease in, out, and these are standard and they're used a lot. But if you want to create something a little different, you can do that with cubic Bezier. Perhaps create, and you can compare. So here's what ease looks like. This is what I created, and we're going to click go, and you can see the difference. There's linear. I click go, and see linear. It's like it's a smooth straight line. With what I've created, there's a little bounce to it, so you can play with it a little bit more. You can move these around, see what happens. So it's just another resource. All right, let's go on to our next code pin and talk about animations. So this, instead of circles, we're gonna work with squares. I've got 4 squares to share with you. Our first one is square A. And instead of transition, we're using animation. But it looks very similar. So we establish a duration, and every animation has to have a name. And it's good to make it something that, just like when you're declaring any kind of variable, something that makes sense, that is reflective of what it is. So here, this animation is square A, because I have multiple squares. So this is the first. So we have a duration of 3 seconds, which you saw upon page load. So I'm going to refresh again. And I set something called keyframes up. So this is, and the keyframes references the name of your animation. So I have square A, keyframes for square A. I want square A to start. This is from and to, so I want it to start. This is the starting point. So I'm going to want it to transform, to rotate as it's transformed, and I'm going to have it rotate 1 turn within that 3 seconds. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at square B. So you can tell we have the squares are similar, and yet we've applied some different properties. So for square B, we have an animation name of square B. We still have a duration of 3 seconds, and we have a timing function of ease in and an iteration count of 3. The iteration count is the number of times the animation will play. So and then the shortcut for that, animation, square B, 3 seconds, ease in, 3. So if I hide these and save, so maybe I should uncomment that one. So you can see comparing them two side by side with the addition of the timing function and the iteration count does, just the addition of those 2 things and the difference that makes. If we look at our keyframes for square B, they look exactly the same as the keyframes that were used on square A. So technically, I could just change this to square A and it would look the same, because the animation itself is the same, or at least the keyframes are exactly the same. The animation, the addition of the other things are different. So, am I confusing anybody yet? Are we lost?
Good.
Okay.
Good.
So let's look at square C. And we have something new here. Now we have square C doing even more things. And square C is just not stopping. And that's because I've added another property, or I've changed a property. So square C, if we look at what it is doing, it has a name of square C, animation duration, 3 seconds, timing function, ease in. I believe these are all the same. Iteration count, instead of 3, it is now infinite. So it's going to keep moving. It isn't going to stop. It's infinite. And then we have this animation direction. And right now it's set on alternate or alternate, whether the animation should play forward, reverse, or in alternate cycles. So I could change this and make it go reverse. And instead of going to the right, it's going to go counterclockwise to all the others. So, and then of course we have a shortcut for that as well. Animation, square C, 3 seconds, ease in, infinite, and alternate. So let's bump on. We have, so I've added something here. So there is another property called animation play state. So this is infinite. There are green squares infinitely rotating and turning. If I have this play state so that when I hover on it, it pauses. So animation play state will specify whether an animation is playing or paused. So it gives us some new, and of course you could do the opposite as well, whereas if somebody was to hover over something, it would play. So just some more tools in the animation toolbox. And then I'm going to go ahead and you can see again our keyframes for every single one of these squares so far are exactly the same. I'm still just rotating one turn. The only difference in how I've written the keyframes this time is instead of from and to, you can also use percentages, 0% to 100%. It does the same thing. So let's look at our final square, which is really going to get crazy. See all the things that our final square is doing. And hopefully you can see as we're going along how we're just like kind of building with each square, building upon what has been done before, changing things up just a little bit. Let's see. So we had talked about earlier that with animations that you can, the final state, something that we've introduced here is the animation fill mode, and it's set to forwards. This sets how the animation applies styles to its target before and after its execution. So the values are none, forwards, backwards, and both. So I've got it set to forwards. I'm going to change this because you can see how once it fulfilled the animation, I don't have this square set to infinite, so it did stop. We had it set to 6 instead. So after a time, it did stop. Let's change this so we can see. If we change this to backwards, so you remember what the initial state was of this square where the border was to the right. When an animation stops, it should go back to that original state. So it went back to its original state. So it's kind of awkward for it to say backwards, but you have to think about back to its original state, what it looked like. Forwards is going to set the what it looks like at its ending state. It's going to keep that. So it goes through the animation, and when it's done, instead of flipping itself back to its original state, it just stays where it ended. Which is why you now see the border to the left. So now we've done some fun things with our keyframes. The reason I showed you percentages before is because you can do things at different percentages all along the way. So now you're creating a like a timeline, or I guess like a timeline or a path of things that you can do along the way as your object is animating. So let's turn some of these off so you can see what happens. So you can see some of the changes. So you can see here, we're just rotating. We're not moving, we're just rotating. And we're not changing. Let's see, there is one color changing in here. And here, border right, threw in another color change. So now you can tell it's 25%. This is starting to change color. So that was something new that was added in. At 15%, we decided we're going to rotate again, and we're going to scale. So that creates, we're still not moving like before when we saw it originally. We saw it moving along the x-axis. Now we're just scaling and rotating. And then at 75%, let's move. Let's move along the x-axis a little bit. Let's do some more stuff. So now we're rotating, we're translating, we're changing colors. So you can see how we can combine all of these different types of properties at different times, and you can do it. It just can become really powerful as to the things that you can do just with CSS.